know the different types. These are just pictures. A circuit literally is just a circuit, a group of these neurons working together. You do not need to know them. We're going to skip over them and finish off with this last topic for today. You basically know all about the microscopic parts of your nervous system, except for one last thing, is what happens if you damage it. You know about tissues. You know when you damage tissues, you could either fibrose or regenerate. And when it comes to nervous tissue, they're likely to fibrose. Why? You're not likely to regenerate it. How do you know? It's simple. If you were to sever the spinal cord, you'll become paralyzed permanently. You won't become paralyzed for a week or a month and then later walk. No. Why? Because you don't regenerate the spinal cord. Why? Because you don't regenerate nervous tissue. It has a limited ability to regenerate. Meaning basically, it's not. Why? It's because neurons don't really regenerate. And I say don't really because you can generate a neuron in specific situations. I want you to know the one situation where you might be able to regenerate a neuron. Well, there's one particular instance when you might be able to do that. It's if the cell body remains intact. That's what you see on this slide. You will only repair neurons, possibly, only if the cell body remains intact. Well, that basically means you could damage things like the dendrites and the soma. But if you damage the cell body, the neuron won't regenerate. When you cut through someone's spinal cord, you damage cell bodies. They don't regenerate. So when we talk about fixing or regenerating nervous tissue or neurons, we're really, in this case, talking about how do you fix an axon. Because remember, the cell body has to stay in place. And like usual, I want you to know the steps in the repair of an axon or the regeneration of a neuron. There are 4 steps. I want you to know them in order and what happens in each step. And you can see them all on this image here, this last image. Like usual, I'll name the 4 basic steps in the regeneration. And then I'll go back over and talk about what happens in each step. So let's imagine you are, again, maybe cutting up some vegetables for dinner and you slice through your finger. Maybe you nick a nerve. Over time, it can possibly heal as long as the cell body's intact. And your body's going to go through 4 major steps to do it. In order, first step is called Wallerian degeneration and chromatolysis. The next step is called, axon growth. Third step is called regeneration tube. And then the 4th step is the axon grows and reattaches to its target. So let's go through these 4 steps. So what's going on? There's something called, first step is Wallerian degeneration and chromatolysis. What's going on here? It's going to seem sort of counterintuitive, but this is what happens in your body. So again, we're just saying we have cut through an axon. How do we fix it? Well, when you cut through the axon, the first thing is going to happen is the distal segment of the axon will actually get broken down. Your body will get rid of it. Meaning the part of the axon that is not attached to the cell body gets broken down. That's the distal end. While the part of the axon that is still attached to the soma, to the cell body, will still be there. When you break down this distal part of the axon, we call that chromatolysis on Wallerian degeneration. You're degenerating that distal part of the axon. Why? Your body doesn't use it. Your body will regrow the axon using part of the axon that was still attached to the soma. So that's step 1. Wallerian degeneration and chromatolysis is simply when you degenerate, when you break down the part of the axon that was cut away from the cell body. Then the second step is simple. The axon will begin to grow. That is the second step. The axon grows. But you could imagine the axon doesn't know where to grow towards because it was cut away from wherever it was reaching out to. So it needs some help to get to its original location. And it's going to get help from Schwann cells. Schwann cells are going to come in and make a little tube made out of myelin. And the axon is going to use this tube to grow in. And we name this tube. It's called the regeneration tube. That's step 3. So in step 3, you have regeneration tube formation. What happens here? Schwann cells make myelin to form a tube to guide the axon. And then once it makes the tube, you'll do your last step, which is the axon will finish growing and reconnect to its target cell. That's it. And like always, keep it simple. First step, Wallerian and degeneration and chromatolysis. Break down the part of the axon not attached to the cell body. Step 2, axon grows. Why? Axon is growing. Step 3, regeneration tube formation. What happens here? Schwann cells make myelin to form a regeneration tube to guide the axon towards its location. And then step 4, the axon